Welcome to Chiefs Live, brought to you by your Midwest Ford dealers, everyone. Josh Loney, Brad Young with you live at One Arrowhead Drive as the Chiefs off-season just continues to move.
Off-season, there is no off-season.
No, there is no
my
off-season.
friend.
In fact, I just need to leave town because when I leave a town, big things happen. I left town over Super Bowl weekend. The Chiefs hire an offensive coordinator. I leave town this past weekend just for a nice little extended President's Day weekend. And, well, Monday was not a vacation day as the phone was blowing up with, of course, the news.
You do take vacations like a doctor.
I take vacations because you work 7 days a week during the season. I take these little, I use those days, and I like to go with long weekends. And
it's good to have you back.
I might as well not take it this week because it was pretty much a work day all day yesterday from remote location. And I was in the AFC West City, but I'll say the same state as where Stanford route came from, but not in Oakland. I did not take my vacation in Oakland, as much as I know you love to go to the Oakland area. And
some nice hot spots.
Some hot spots in Oakland. Of course, everybody talking about the Stanford route acquisition, but we're going to start off with probably the most important storyline. Jeremy Lin, last night, 21 points in a 191 loss to New Jersey Nets. So Lin Sandy reigns strong still throughout all of the sports kingdom. No, that's an attempt at a joke coming back. You know, we had flight diversions last night, Brad. I didn't get home until about 2:30 in the morning, and then this morning we started really early, which is I can plug a video series. I got to sit down and talk with Chiefs offensive coordinator Brian Daboll for the first time. Actually, all the new Chiefs coaches. We're starting our Coaches Corner series on KCChiefs.com. We should have one up within the end of the week. Jim Zorn had some fascinating things to say, as he always is, about kind of what he wants to do with Matt Castle, the competition he wants to see at the quarterback position, not just from Ricky Stanton and Castle, but if they're able to re-sign Kyle Orton or whoever comes in. I think some things that the fans are going to find very intriguing from staff members that have been on staff, and of course the new coaching staff members as well.
I love the Coaches Corner series on KCChiefs.com, not just because you're the host.
You like the things that Sean hosts just a little bit.
It's because you don't really get to hear from a lot of the offensive and defensive assistants a lot. They're really interesting guys, and a lot of these guys are so talented that one of these days you might see them as a head coaching gig somewhere. It's really interesting to get into the mind of some of these guys because they're just so sharp, so intelligent, their football IQ is off the charts.
You want to talk about a guy that first impression blew us away? Darius Swinton, the special teams quality control coach. Romeo Crennel came out and said that Darius Swinton really impressed him in the interview with his football knowledge. After you see his video on KCChiefs.com, when we do it in a couple weeks, he'll definitely have that impact on the fan base as well. A really impressive guy. He's younger than I am. He's a younger guy, and he definitely is an up-and-comer in this league. Anyway, so keep your eye out on that this week as we'll unveil some of the new coaches and our discussions with them as Coaches Corner Series will kick off. Of course, right now on Chiefs Live, it's all about Stanford route, how it impacts the Chiefs going forward, what it means for Brandon Carr, and kind of the knee-jerk reaction yesterday, Brad, not only from fans, but really from every media member was, you said before the show started, doomsday. Chiefs sign route, Brandon Carr, goodbye, unrestricted free agency. The two moves go hand in hand.
Anybody. It's just such negative thinking. I don't like the negative thinking right away. It's like you've got a few weeks before Brandon Carr technically becomes a free agent. I mean, and you heard what Scott Pioli said this morning on Sports Radio 810 WHB about it. It's like I can't quote him verbatim, but it was like, of course we're still talking about it. You're not completely ruling it out.
You won't have to quote him verbatim because we brought the interview right here to the show. And short and sweet, what I cautioned everyone yesterday was don't be so quick to sign off on Brandon Carr's exit. Yes, logic, it could happen. Logic, it's filled with logic. You spend a lot of money on corners. You got a starting corner. They had to choose between Bo and Carr. You're going to choose Bo with the offense and routes available. It's a great contingency plan right down the list. Yes, it's all filled with logic, but it doesn't end the Chiefs' core positioning and philosophy of you draft, you develop, and you re-sign your core players. Brandon Carr is a core player. The Chiefs want him back. Brandon Carr wants to be back. Will that end up happening in Kansas City? Will the price be right for Brandon Carr? I don't know that, but signing Stanford route does not necessarily mean the exit of Brandon Carr. Chiefs General Manager Scott Pioli talked about just that today with friends of Chiefs Live, Stephen St. John of 810 WHB and Nate Bukaty on the Border Patrol this morning. He also touched on a couple of other things we'll touch on after the interview airs here. touches on the Chiefs' salary cap standing. As we know, they've carried $20 million over surplus from last year. It's going to help this team re-sign key in-house free agents and sign external free agents such as Stanford Routt. And he'll also touch on the status of Dwayne Bowe. Will the team be franchising him? And then I'll go over those numbers with you as well. Some interesting things, though, said by General Manager Scott Pioli earlier this morning on Chiefs radio partner 810 WHB.
And now we're joined by Chiefs General Manager Scott Pioli. Scott, good morning. How you doing today?
Good morning, guys. How you doing today? I'm doing well.
We're spread out all over the country, but
Yeah,
you're bringing
what
us back.
is this all about? So I understand Surprise. I understand Lubbock. But so why can't we get all you guys in one place?
We don't get along. We try to do the show in separate locations as much as possible, just to keep everything happy, running smoothly. But it's always good to talk football. But you know what? I know I've been told by several people. We talked about this before. You're a big baseball fan, aren't you?
Yeah.
You've developed into quite the Royals fan, huh?
Yeah, I love baseball, and it seems every town that I've been to, there's one thing I share in common with the city that I go to. And I grew up in New York and was a Yankee hater growing up. And one of the first things that happened here, my first Royals game, I had a chance to meet George Brett, and we had a good, strong conversation talking trash about the Yankees for a solid 20 minutes right out of the gate. And it makes it easy to be a Royals fan when, and my daughter absolutely loves the Royals. I take her to a bunch of games, but it makes it easy to be a Royals fan with this bunch of people that are Yankee haters. So that's right up my alley.
Yeah, you're with us on that one forever. Now let's talk about the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, as much as we all dislike the Yankees, we feel equally the same way about the Oakland Raiders. But the newest Kansas City Chief is a former Oakland Raider. You're bringing in Stanford Routt as a new quarterback for the Chiefs. Let's talk a little bit about the signing, a 3-year deal to bring in Stanford Routt to play for Kansas City. Tell us why he was the right fit for Kansas City, and tell us about the player Stanford Routt.
Well, first of all, you made the comment, him being a former Raider, we're trying to clean up his life a little bit and get him out here to be a Kansas City Chief. So we're trying to make an honest man out of him. But, this was an interesting opportunity that came up. Free agency doesn't start again for, a couple of weeks. And this happens every year. There's a couple of players or a player or two that are good quality players that end up on the street. They're available prior to free agency. And you have an opportunity to make a decision or not. And knowing where we're at with the cap situation and knowing some of the plans and things that might happen with our roster, we want to try to keep Brandon here. Nothing was done yet, so we saw an opportunity at a good player at a very fair contract who really wanted to be a Chief, and we thought it would be a good marriage. So we worked on it. He was in here last week, and we worked on it towards the end of the weekend. The end of the week, and then over the weekend we got the deal pretty much agreed to, then tightened everything up yesterday.
You mentioned wanting to keep Brandon Carr here. Most people have taken this news as a sign that Brandon Carr won't be coming back to the Chiefs. Is that accurate, or will you still try to pursue signing him?
No, and I'll say this, the signing of Stanford Routt does not impact where we're at with Brandon Carr. As a matter of fact, Romeo and I both reached out to Brandon yesterday as this was unfolding and talked to him. I spoke personally with Brandon, again, without getting into the details of what that conversation is. But he knows, he's known before that he's someone we want to try to keep here. He's still someone we want to keep a Chief. And this signing doesn't eliminate our conversation. It doesn't eliminate, the feelings that we have for Brandon and how we want to have him here. He knows that. He wants to be here. We want him here. And we're going to try to work, if both sides find a deal that makes sense for one another, we'd love to have Brandon back. Again, part of the big picture philosophy between keeping a large amount of cap room and managing the cap the right way is that when opportunities come to improve your football team with good players, you keep trying to do it. So we had conversations not only with Brandon but his agent and told him, hey, listen, we've been talking. Let's continue to talk. Let's see how things work out. If we come to a deal that makes sense for everybody, let's do that.
Scott Pioli is our guest. All right, Scott, for fans that are wanting Brandon Carr to return, honestly, they may have been a little bit upset when Stanford Routt was signed because they thought, as Nate said, well, this means the door's closed on Brandon Carr. You're telling us that's not true. But also yesterday, Adam Schefter from ESPN sends out a tweet that says, teams with most cap room today, Tampa Bay, $67 million under the cap. Kansas City, $62 million under the cap. Is that accurate?
Yeah, here's the, I guess it started last week. The number that was out there was 63. And here's what happens. At this point in time, the NFL has not completely reconciled the cap for 2012. And what I mean by saying that is any incentives that were earned by players for individual teams in 2011, and let's just say a player had a Pro Bowl incentive in their contract for $200,000. That, because that happens after the season and all incentives in 2011 are reconciled during the month of February, that isn't showing against the 2012 cap yet. That's on the books with the league office where these people get the numbers from. The other thing that hasn't happened is any players who have paragraph 5 escalators, which are base salary escalators, for the 2012 season, even if that triggered back in 2010, 2009, or this past season, those numbers aren't showing against the cap yet. So what's happened here is there's numbers showing at the league that there's X amount of number. Like in our case, it was showing that we had $63 million of cap space. The reality is that's true at that moment, but by the time the the first day of the league year, the numbers of escalators and bonuses from last year will be netted out. So say, for instance, what we have is $63 million of cap space showing at the league. However, there's $18 million of escalators that 7 different players have earned, contracts, again, that were done on players 4 years ago. But even though they triggered, it hasn't been netted against the cap yet. So we've got $18 million in escalators. We've got another $5 million of incentives that were earned last season that will count against that. Plus, what we don't have is our restricted free agent tenders. So all told, that number right there is approximately about $25 million against the 63 that isn't showing yet. So all the numbers that the media are seeing on the league website right now are not completely accurate.
And so about $25 million of that, is that basically, if we just subtract that from the 63 that we're talking about, is that fairly accurate as to where you guys stand then?
Correct. Where we'll stand, and again, where the other teams stand, it's just a guesstimate from any other teams because each team only knows internally about their own situations, as to who has escalators, who has incentives that haven't triggered yet. So that $63 million is it's a half truth or a partial truth. It's the truth today, but what it hasn't done is hasn't reconciled the full number for 2012, and that'll happen here. Actually, it should happen someday, one day this week.
Okay, so now a lot of focus of the Chiefs fans, they turn their attention to Dwayne Bowe. How do you feel about the ability to re-sign Dwayne Bowe, or do you think the franchise tag will be used on him?
We're hopeful to re-sign Dwayne. One way or another, we would love to have Dwayne back here as a Chief. Just like Brandon, we would like to find a way to keep the good players that we have. The important part is that you have to come to an agreement. And Dwayne's a player that, again, without getting into specifics, but we've had conversations with Dwayne's representatives as well as Brandon's. And truthfully, a number of other players of ours that are free agents or about to become free agents in a couple of weeks, we've been trying to get players signed, and we're going to continue to do that right up until, whatever that date is. And then if free agency starts, we're going to continue to try to sign some of those players or players from other teams.
Scott, I wanted to ask you one more question about Stanford Routt before we wrap up that entire talk, and it's basically about the type of corner that he is. We've read some things that say that he matches up well with what Romeo Crennel likes to do with his corners. We also know that he's been called for a lot of penalties, holding and pass interference. How big of a concern was that for you when you went into these conversations?
You know, when you look at it on paper, it's an immediate concern. And then when you go back and watch the tape, and then you also watch the tape and then communicate with, one of the advantages we had in this whole situation was we were able to talk to some former Raiders coaches that we have relationships with, too, to try to understand the player a little bit better. There's more that goes into it than just, looking at numbers on paper and also just looking on tape. And we sat down as a staff here, the defensive coaching staff, as soon as this player was released and started looking at things. And some of the things that happened, we really believed we had our own perception as to why they may have happened and been, some of the penalties that were called, maybe as to why they had been called. As we talked about it, our coaching staff really feels very confident that some of the things that were happening are, I don't want to say easy to coach him out of, but they feel very confident there's some things that he can either be coached out of. And then, of course, talking to some of the people that had, that used to coach there and have been with this player, they felt that there was often what they refer to, I think they called it the Raider effect when it comes to penalties being called, that, of course, they're even people that leave there are saying, hey, we're getting called for penalties because we're the Raiders. Now, again, as we watch the film, we feel pretty confident organizationally that some of the things that he may have been called for, he can certainly be coached out of.
Scott, do you anticipate the Chiefs being active in free agency, pursuing other teams' players? You've talked about focusing on re-signing your own players, but you know how fans are. They want to see the Chiefs go out and spend the money that we've talked about available under the cap. You hear the criticisms too. Is it fair? Do you anticipate going out and making some more moves?
Yeah, here's what I know is that we've been active in free agency. The problem is in the past there's been some times where we have pursued players and it hasn't worked out. We're going to continue with a similar plan, and we're just hoping, at this point in time, that there'll be more players available that we want that also want to be here. And so to answer the question, yes, we're going to be active. And then, and hopefully we'll be able to get some deals done. We've got our eyes on some players that I think we're going to pursue right out of the gate, and then we're going to just continue to watch the market as that goes, because there's players that aren't currently free agents that are going to be free agents at some point in time, because with the cap being back this year, there's teams out there that are trying to fight their way to get under the cap to make sure that they can do it. Some are going to have players that restructure. Other teams aren't going to have players that want to restructure, and they'll have to make some tough decisions and release players. So the short answer is yes, we're going to be active, and we're going to continue to be active as that whole process goes. And we're going to be active trying to continue to sign our own players, because I firmly believe that that's a big part of free agency. If whether we sign one of our players now or we wait 4 months into free agency and that player's been a free agent and we get that player back, that's truly a free agent signing. So we plan on being active.
Okay, final question, and we appreciate your time. This is one of the most often asked questions that I'm posed by Chiefs fans. So I'll ask you, if there's a player out there, an impact player, going to cost a lot of money, do you have any reservations about going to Clark Hunt and asking him to sign this player? And do you feel like Clark Hunt doesn't matter about money, he just wants to sign the players that are going to help this team win?
Clark wants to win. Trust me, he wants to win more than he cares about how much money is going to be spent. It has been spent. This family has spent a ton of money in the past. And prior to my arrival, it was one of the things that, I've got to say this publicly too. Prior to my arrival, I wanted to make sure that I was associating myself with an organization that was going to do whatever it needed to do to get things done in order to win. And that has been the case from the time that I arrived. And I know that was the way that the Kansas City Chiefs were prior to my arrival. There was, this was a high spending team. And I think the philosophy is we're going to spend when we feel we need to spend. And spending is not an issue. Clark has never stopped me. He hasn't ever slowed me down. And I don't think he's going to do that in the future. In fact, I know he's not going to do that in the future. Now it's just a matter of just because you have money and it's available doesn't mean that you have to spend it. I look back in retrospect, maybe some of the things we could have done in 09 and 10 in free agency, and truthfully, I'm glad we didn't do them. I look at the cost of some of those players that were available because there's a very limited market in those years in terms of quality of player. What some of those players signed for, I'm still comfortable with where we're at.
Scott, thank you for the time as always. We'll talk to you again real soon.
All right, guys, thank you very much. Enjoy Arizona, enjoy Lubbock.
Scott Pioli with a lot of interesting comments there to Chiefs radio partner 810 WHB this morning. You read between the lines there, the Chiefs sound like they did their homework. He said former members of the Raiders coaching staff, you put 2 and 2 together. The 2011 Chiefs Hall of Fame inductee, The Rock, Kevin Ross, as we know, has very good relationship, Brad, with members of the Chiefs coaching staff and also members of the Chiefs front office. So he coached. You didn't have your microphone on it. And he coached Stanford Route. Let's just go ahead and hold it up and
I had to go blow my nose during the break.
I know, he had to take a break and
I'm
he
good.
sat back down. It's the things they don't see here. The hurry to get back. And,
Probably wouldn't have seen it if you hadn't brought it up.
But you were giving me the weird look and like, what should I do? Let's do it. It's a live show. We love it, man. But Kevin Ross, obviously the Chiefs reached out and
Just keeps getting better.
Yeah, it does. And contacted Kevin Ross. It sounds like to get his opinions on Stanford Rouse.
100%. He was his position coach at Oakland over the past few years, and I actually heard him on I heard Kevin Ross on an interview locally yesterday, I believe it was as well, and he just had nothing but good things to say about the guy. Had said that he's very studious. The guy works really hard, and they're also asking about like the penalties, and he was the most penalized cornerback in the league last year, and they were just like, well, we're the Raiders, we get penalized a lot. That was basically his response, and a lot of the penalties that were called on Stanford Route every week after a game, if you have there's like a questionable penalty, you could submit it to the league and say, was this really a penalty? And a lot of them came back to like, actually they weren't. So it kind of makes you think.
Well, it could be. That's kind of what Scott Pioli was alluding to.
And he's aggressive.
It's in that Raider mentality. We discussed this a little bit on the show last week, Brad. Mitch Holthus and I did with, the whole penalty aspect of things in the league and defensive backs isn't the most concerning thing to me, to him, because number one, it's the hardest position to play. Number two, when you're the Raiders, there is a mentality, and you hear it around the league, that the Raiders are flagged more often because they are the Raiders. And it's funny, we make jokes about them all the time, but when you're consistently, year after year, leading the league in penalties, you don't have the same team every year. You don't have the same players every year. You wonder how much is kind of subconscious with officials, where they think that kind of looks like a penalty. Well, I'm going to throw it because these are the Raiders, and they commit fouls on every single play. As we know in the NFL, and Herm Edwards used to say it when I said foul, it made me think of Herm Edwards. You can throw a flag on any play.
100%.
In the NFL, you can throw a flag on any play. It's whether or not how severe it is and what the official wants to throw it on. So 2011 wasn't Route's greatest season if you compare it to 2010. In 2010, he was the number 2 quarterback opposite Nnamdi Asomugha. You could argue that he was better than Asomugha that year. He had the lowest completion percentage of any cornerback in the league. Opposing quarterbacks only hit about just over 3 of every 10 passes that went his direction. Stanford Route in Kansas City, no matter which way you cut it, is good business for the Chiefs. Obviously, Chiefs Nation hopes that Brandon Carr can come back, because you think of the way this league is, and it's a passing league, and third downs, and how important it is to play man coverage. Think of what the Chiefs could do with Brandon Carr in tow, along with Stanford Route and Brandon Flowers. For instance, let's just go ahead and say that we've got a dime personnel package out there. You've got Derek Johnson playing your middle linebacker position. You've got three corners in the game playing man coverage. You've got Eric Berry, who is able to play inside the box and really thrives when he plays inside the box. It's almost another linebacker / another guy in coverage. You've got Javier Arenas in the game, whose specialty, I guess, his best ability, I think, is his ability to blitz off the edge, is what he did in college. And then you've got Kendrick Lewis playing on the back line. That's a pretty formidable nickel / dime personnel.
That's stout.
And in this day and age, when you've got 2 tight ends in New England running the seam, and Jimmy Graham catching all sorts of passes, and kind of the evolution of the tight end game, when it gets to third down, you can't have linebackers guarding those guys. You want Jovan Belcher, your run-stopping thumper, out of the game, and you want a DB in there. And, boy, if the Chiefs are able to get Brandon Carr back, it's going to open a lot of doors, as what Romeo Crennel, who already plays heavy doses of nickel and dime personnel and sub-package sets, it's going to open a lot of doors for what they can do.
It's also all about depth. I think a lot of people in the whole doomsday mentality was, oh, we got Stanford out, we're not going to sign Brandon Carr. Why not? You know, if you look around the league, you look at teams like the Jets or the Eagles who have so much depth on their team, especially in the secondary. In the secondary, I know that you obviously want to have your best players on the field at all times, but it's a long football season, and the more you hear, the more with reports, as the years go on, it's going to get longer. You're talking about bringing in some more Thursday night games now, short rest time, and this and that. Guys are going to get banged up. That's the harsh reality of it. I mean, Chiefs fans know better than anybody from this last season. Having depth is great. I'm not saying sign Stanford out and put him on the bench. I'm saying the guy, if you get into some sort of rotation or this or that, you got depth. I mean, look at the Eagles last year. They were able to deal with Asante Samuel and Nnamdi Asomugha. Their whole mentality didn't really work out, although they kind of got hot at the end of the year. But the whole mentality is just get the most talent you can, and not just talent. I think what the Chiefs are doing is get the right type of player as well to come in, because especially every week we talk about it. If you're going to get depth at one position, the defensive secondary has to be the number one position in my mind to have depth on, because you have to be able to get those guys in and out of there. And if you have one injury, it can devastate a game.
Oh, no doubt. And we saw the last few years, Brandon Flowers has missed a game here or there, and then you saw what happened with the Chiefs last year, losing Eric Berry, Jamal Charles, Tony Moyaki. And yes, depth, when cornerbacks are at a premium, if you have a chance to have three really good ones, that makes you one of the elite secondaries in the National Football League, don't think the Chiefs aren't going to try and do that. The best thing I can say is stay tuned to see what happens with Brandon Carr. If talks stall, or if they stop altogether, you're going to hear about it, because that's what happens in the NFL. You hear about that because it gains traction going into free agency with other clubs. Right now, both teams, besides Scott Pioli's comments of him and Romeo called Brandon yesterday, reiterated the fact they still want him here, that's really the only thing we've heard from either side in contract negotiations, which tell you, yes, they are ongoing, and you've got to take Scott Pioli at his word that he still wants Brandon Carr back. It definitely changes the game, I guess, a little bit on the Chiefs' positioning and leverage when you sign a player like Stanford Routt. But I don't think it changes at all that the Chiefs want to have a top defense in this league under Romeo Crennel, a defensive-minded head coach, and it would give them one of the best secondaries in the league. To further, before we close the door on Stanford Routt, it is very easy to just look at penalties and say, well, he led the league in penalties as position last year. Not good. Well, he's one of the, first off, just like Carr is projected to be, he was one of the top free agents on the board for a reason. He became a cap casualty, was obviously able to sign before the other free agents because he got out of his contract in Oakland. But Oakland plays more man-to-man coverage than, I don't know, would you say 2/3 of the league, Brad? Maybe even in the top 5% of the league. And
they're a team that's able to do that because they get so much pressure from the interior of their defensive line. Guys like Richard Seymour, it enables them to do that. And I think here, when you've got guys like Justin Houston and Tom Bahali and a lot of those guys on the inside also getting pressure, I think it's a positive thing. And not to cut you off, but I think it's also a positive thing as a Chiefs fan. Stanford Routt wasn't traded here. I mean, he came here.
He had multiple offers.
Reportedly, he came here, stayed for 2 days, loved it, went and checked out some other teams, and he came back because he agrees with what the staff in the front office and the direction that they're going, and he believes in it, and that's what he said. I think his agent or somebody released it today that he believes they could win right away. I mean, some of those other teams, he could go in and I know maybe the best place to be in the fall/winter, Buffalo isn't the best place to be, but I just think if a guy has an option, he looks around and chooses the Chiefs. I think as Chiefs fans, it's got to give you some sort of confidence that a wanted man chose Kansas City because he believes that they're going to win.
You say wanted man, and I smile because it was almost remind me of National Signing Day yesterday. The reports come out to
I was excited about it.
Text messages go. You've got ESPN, NFL Network. Everyone says Stanford and Pro Football Talk. Stanford Routt will make a decision today. So he's obviously sending that text message out, or his agent is, to all the media outlets, and then 3 hours later, it's revealed the arrowhead. He puts on the cap. That's kind
Did he really?
No, he didn't. But
Oh.
that's kind of what I picture when you say, because you don't hear free agents saying that, like, other than LeBron, I'm going to make my decision soon. Well, this is a guy who's in a position with multiple offers. Free agency hasn't started yet, at least the unrestricted type, and he was able to do that. You also listen to Scott Pioli talk a little bit about Dwayne Bowe. You read between the lines. You think, the way I listened to it, I thought that the Chiefs are closer to slapping a tag on Dwayne Bowe. They have 2 weeks to do so, and then a lot of people were asking me yesterday, why don't the Chiefs tag Bowe? Why would you tag him on the first day? You've got 2 weeks. Unless contract negotiations are completely stalled and you know you're not going to sign him to a long-term deal before the 2-week period's out, there's no reason to slap the franchise tag on him on the first day of the 15-day window. It goes from February 20th through the 5th of March. Of course, if the Chiefs were to reach a long-term deal with Bowe, does that bring in Brandon Carr as a tag possibility? Is something you could debate. The price tag for cornerbacks for the 1-year franchise tag amount, and these are all less than last year because the new CBA, it's not based off the top 5 individual salaries as it was in past. The numbers computed off of a very complicated scale that deals with the salary cap numbers of the past 5 years. Regardless, it's about $10.5 million to franchise a cornerback, where last year was about $13.5 million. So you're getting a $3 million decrease there, and for wide receivers, it's about $9.5 million, where last year was $11.5 million. So you get about a $2 million savings there. So stay tuned with Dwayne Bowe as well. If the Chiefs do lose Brandon Carr, as I said, you know they're going to be able to keep Dwayne Bowe one or the other. They don't have to make that decision, and the addition of Stanford Routt numbs that loss. The Chiefs obviously have the money to be active in free agency. They plan to be active in free agency, and I think carrying over that $24 million surplus that they activated last week, and read about all the gritty details on KCChiefs.com, shows they plan on being active. And then when it comes to the franchise tag, Bucky Brooks on the NFL Network was going through the wide receivers, and he agrees, if you can't reach a long-term deal with Dwayne Bowe, slap that franchise tag on him.
All right, guys, we did a Friday with the running backs. Once again, we are in economics class here, right in front of our chalkboard. We had T.J. Hushmanzada, Willie McGinnis. Jason gave us some information, some insight as to whether or not these guys are going to get tagged. You see the number up there, $9.4 million for the franchise tag. Guys, let's go. Wes Welker, first up, 31 years old, 208 catches the last 2 years. Tag him or not?
Well, I'm not going to tag him because here's a guy who played 3 years before, a total of 96 receptions, okay? So we understand that the system and Tom Brady makes him what he is and has made him flourish into the receiver he is. So I'm not going to tag him. He's asking for $10 million. He would want to get tagged, but I'm going to work out a deal with Wes. I don't know what you think, TJ, but you're a receiver. Give me some insight.
I'm in agreement. I wouldn't tag him. I would try to work out 3-4 year deal that if I'm the GM and that's my team, that benefits me. I have a great quarterback. I have a great system in place, and I feel he's not going to go to another team and have the same type of production.
Because of the system.
Right.
Okay. And here's another guy that we've heard some conversations. Since Randy Moss, big time, big play receiver, Vincent Jackson getting down the field, making big chunks of yardage.
What do we think?
I don't think they're going to franchise him.
Okay. Tag him or not?
No tag. Too much money.
Too much money.
It's
There's
too
the other
much.
thing, too, is with Vincent Jackson, the money would be 13.7 because they had tagged him this past season. Dwayne Bowe, he's good enough to pay. Is he a number one, though? Do you tag him?
Well, you look across the league of all the receivers, is there their number one guy? I mean, they got Baldwin. They got another receiver, Preston, to stretch the field. They got a couple of young tight ends. Do you pay him that money? Do you need him there?
I was on the fence with this one, but I'm going to say I'm tagging Dwayne
Okay,
Bowe.
so 0 for 2. This was our first one.
This is your first tag, so
yes.
we're going to tag him.
Yeah, yes. I want to keep Dwayne Bowe for the simple fact.
Well, you can keep him. You can just work out a deal with him.
He's been productive.
Sure.
He's been productive, and they did draft Jonathan Baldwin last year.
Correct.
So you don't know if they think they're going to groom him to take his place, but I'm going to franchise Dwayne Bowe and try to work out a long-term deal. He's still a young player.
Sure, exactly. So we have our first guy, Dwayne Bowe, the franchise tag.
Yeah, and so yesterday's move with Stanford Routt, it all but assures you would believe that Dwayne Bowe will end up in Kansas City, as if the Chiefs have to decide on to use the franchise tag on either Carr or Bowe, they'd obviously choose Dwayne Bowe at this time now that they have have signed Stanford Routt. The one thing to consider about the franchise tag, the Chiefs, the way they've done it, at least with Tamba Hali, and most teams do it, you put the tag on somebody, and then you continue to work out the negotiations towards a long-term deal. Think of Tom Ali was tagged last year before the lockout. They come by, but by the time it was time to report to training camp, he had signed a new 5-year deal or whatever it was with the team. So you don't just slap him for 1 year. That just kind of buys you the time while you can figure out where they're at with agent. And Bo, a fantastic year last year, I think, pretty underrated, although his touchdown numbers were down, what he was able to do with the circumstances.
He had 1,159 yards last season, and the previous year in 2010 he had 1,162, so it's only 3 yards away from his personal high, personal season high. The touchdown numbers are down. I think that's why such a fantasy world now, fantasy football world, that's why people were like, Bo's fallen off, he's fallen off. No, he hasn't fallen off. The guy was able to catch almost 1,200 yards from 3 different quarterbacks throughout an entire season. It's pretty impressive, and 81 catches.
And one of those quarterbacks, let's be honest, you don't want to trash guys, but Tyler Palko really struggled in the passing game, and that was a quarter of Dwayne Bowe's season. And while Palko was trying to find his way, that is a quarter of Dwayne Bowe's season, and he's still able to get over 1,000 yards.
With the loss of Jamal Charles so early in the season, Dwayne Bowe became the ultimate target of defenses to try and shut this guy down, and he was still able to rack up almost 1,200 yards in a season. It's impressive.
Our friend John Chadwick here, or excuse me, Stephen Hilt in the chat room says, "What about a tag and trade, Josh?" That stuff gets a little more detailed. I guess you probably you wouldn't tag and trade Bo. I'd assume you mean if Bo were to agree to a long-term deal, you tag and trade Carr. I don't know enough about what their value is on the open market. I know the tag and trade certainly worked with New England and Matt Castle when they knew they didn't want to just have Matt Castle walk. Tom Brady was coming back. They knew they could get something for him, so they did the old tag and trade with the Kansas City Chiefs, and it was only for a second-round pick, but that's something to consider as well. If the Chiefs do lose Dwayne Bowe or Brandon Carr or Kyle Orton, any of these guys to free agency, you're likely going to get some sort of compensatory pick. If you recall, the team got last year, I believe it was Terrell Poe with the 199th pick, a 6th rounder. That was a compensatory selection from losing Wade Smith, who was kind of a reserve guard in tackle in free agency. I believe it was last year. That might have been 2009. Regardless, when you lose free agents, there's a complicated formula, but you can get back picks at the same time. So the Chiefs could still get compensation if they are to lose Brandon Carr or Kyle Orton or whoever else, Jackie Battle, whoever may be on the open market. Lots to talk about free agency. I have a feeling there's going to be a lot to talk more in the coming weeks with the franchise tag window open. The Chiefs still haven't released any players yet, and as players are released closer on to this free agency start, which we're now about 3 weeks away from, Brad, I think there's going to be some more action for the Chiefs before the official start of free agency. But this is also another big week. It's NFL Combine week. When we come back, let's talk about the NFL Combine, where we're going to be camped out all week. We leave tomorrow, and KCChiefs.com will be in Indy all week for you for all the player workouts. We'll be right back on KCChiefs.com in just a minute.
Together, we are music. Hearts beating to the same drum. We are many, but we are one. Brothers of the Sun.
The concert event of the year. Brothers of the Sun Tour. Superstars Kenny Chesney, Tim McGraw. With Grace Potter and the Nocturnals and Jake Owen. Tickets will go on sale Friday, December 9th at 10 a.m.
The new Chiefs team store is located on the Founders Plaza on the north side of the new Arrowhead Stadium. Open on game days and from 10 to 6 Monday through Saturday throughout the season, the team store has the largest selection of Chiefs merchandise in the Kansas City area. Featuring official sideline apparel from Reebok, and you can shop 24 hours a day, 7 days a week at kcchiefs.com. They sacrifice, they protect, they answer the call at all times. They are the men and women of our armed forces, and their will, heart, dedication in service to the country that we call home is nothing less than extraordinary. Return the favor. Text the word return to 90999 now for your $10 donation, or simply visit returnthefavor.org. Please join us in returning the favor.
Welcome back to Chiefs Live, presented by your Midwest Ford dealers. A good 3/4 of the first hour of our show taken up by Stanford Route free agency, Chiefs salary cap standing, the franchise tag, you name it. But there's another part of additions to the 2012 Kansas City Chiefs, and it gets moving this week as we take a break from free agency and resume it next week in the franchise tag period. This is the NFL Combine, and this is the great thing. This is the great business plan of the NFL, Brad, is there's always something. You've got Stanford Route signed early in the week, and at the tail end of the week, you're going to be seeing Scott Pioli from the podium, Romeo Crennel from the podium, and talking about prospects. You're going to be seeing some of the rumored interest that the Chiefs have in players interviewed on KCChiefs.com. You're going to hear about the success stories in the Combine and the tales of guys who aren't doing themselves much good in the Combine. So I guess I'd ask you, going into this week and the college aspect of things, what are you most looking forward to from a position standpoint? What are you looking for this week as Combine?
That's an interesting question. I'm not really too excited to see one specific player and see how he does and this and this and that, just because every year you have a guy who jumps out of the roof or he runs a great Combine, and Mike Mayock says he's really great. Case in point, Virgil Green last year from Nevada, who had an unbelievable Combine. The guy was he was strong, he was fast, he was jumping, he did this, he did that. And then the season came and he did nothing for Denver. And it's kind of amazing to see that. But the one thing that I really loved last year when we were at the Combine, Josh and I had a chance to watch the wide receivers do their broad jump.
Some pretty good ones, didn't we?
Broad jump. And we also had I'm not even saying a specific player. I'm just saying just sheer athleticism.
No, there were two.
To see these guys run, seeing Julio Jones do his broad jump.
No, that was incredible.
To see all these guys run 40s, they're absolute freaks of nature to see what these guys pull up. I saw that Alshon Jeffrey cut weight, so he said he wants to run in the 4.5s. The guy's like 6'6", 220. He wants to run a 4.40, which the guy might do it. Look what it did for Julio Jones. Had the Atlanta Falcons unload the farm, so to speak, to move up and get him. And he actually had a pretty good season, too. So that kind of refutes what I said earlier about Virgil Green. But I think if anyone I'm going to watch, the wide receivers are great. And also seeing guys like Stephen P.A., if that's his name, from Oregon State, put up like, what he put up last year, like 200 reps. Put 225 on and the guy set the record. That's my favorite thing to watch, the offensive linemen and defensive linemen, those big dudes with the small arms. Not small arms, they look small because these guys are built like deep freezes. Just bench. I think that's always fun, but I think for pure athleticism to see the wide receivers, it's pretty fun.
Yeah, for me, it comes in, and I talked with Mitch Holthus last week about it, and we'll air that segment here in just a minute, Brad. But for me, it's going to be the junior underclassmen offensive lineman. And the reason I say that is you look at the free agent class around the league at each position, and where the Chiefs need help and where they can find help in free agency. And right now, tackle's very weak. Offensive tackle is one of the weakest free agency, projected free agent spots in the entire league. Really, your number one guy right now on a lot of boards, whether it be CBS Sports or whatever you go to, a lot of the pundits, they point to Jared Gaither as being the number one free agent offensive tackle. And look, we know where Jared Gaither ranked here last year in Kansas City, and then he signed a one-year deal. It didn't work out, and he couldn't find the field. He could not beat out Barry Richardson or Brandon Albert, and he saw the bench. He goes and starts for San Diego. Good for him, but he wasn't part. The Chiefs made a decision, even when he wasn't on the field, that this guy would not be part of their future, and they let him go. And he will probably change cities again this year, and then as the Chargers look to get an upgrade as well, and he's at the point of his career where he's going to get chances, but he's going to travel around. And if he's your number one guy on the board, it shows a lot. The other guy who challenges him is a guy named Demetrius Bell, who was horrid in 2009 and 2010. He never played organized football until his freshman year at Northwestern State. Then he kind of blossomed last season. He's been a project player for the Buffalo Bills, and they're going to try very hard to bring back Demetrius Bell because of the tackle market.
And I think you don't have offensive tackles out there because if a team has an offensive tackle, it's so important to a team in general. You see it in the draft every year. I mean, they always go really high, and those guys stay there. It's because if a team has a good tackle, they lock them up. They lock them up,
Why
and
wouldn't
they
you?
don't let them get the free agency. That's why you have guys like Jared Gaither and Adam Pellegrino and those guys and Will Blackwell out
People are
there
gonna
as
be
free
going-
agent
people are
tackles.
going, Adam
So you
Pellegrino,
literally have
producer, Kansas City Chiefs.
you literally have you don't have those guys out there because you don't. If you're a team and you're smart, you lock those guys up before they get out there.
If I would break down Adam, I'd say he's more of a kind of a speedy wide receiver than a tackle. Maybe a gym rat, a real gym rat.
Real firecracker.
Real firecracker. He's a real class act. He's off the bit. That's how he rolls. Well, Mitch Holthus and I talked about the NFL Combine last week. He couldn't come into today's show because he is on his circus tour of Missouri Valley basketball and Big 12 basketball, but he did stop by last week to talk NFL Combine, what he's looking for, what I'm looking for, and what we're excited. Let's check it out. It's NFL Combine Week on KCChiefs.com as the 65 TPT crew is planted in Indianapolis. Voice of the Chiefs, Mitch Holthus, this week will be on the basketball circus. The circus. So he's kind of a circus.
I'm going to actually work out the Combine. I got some Under Armour. I've got the, it's going to be a V for voice, and you got the number, all right? You know, it's got the position and the number. It's just going to be V, like 469, and I'm going to work out against the other play-by-play guys in the league. I'm worried about Dave Logan with Denver. Everybody else I can take. Josh Loon in San Diego, crush him. Papa Raiders, I'll take him out. So I'm really good in the shuttle run. Very good in the shuttle run.
While you're doing Big 12 and Valley basketball and then going through the circus that is your schedule this time of year, I know you still have your mind on football
Every
and
day.
on what's
Every
going
day.
on at the Combine. So I ask you, Mitch, you pick one thing to watch at this year's Combine. What are you looking for?
Wow. I guess it's based on a need on the offensive line. We've talked about that before. And then I would say nose tackle. Is there a nose tackle that just jumps off the page at the Combine where you can go, ooh, maybe that, you know, we don't know about Poe, but a guy that becomes a Vince Wilforkish kind of guy out of this college group that become power in the middle of that 3-4 defense.
Well, the tackle situation, especially for the underclassmen, the juniors, is something
It's all
that I
about the
really
juniors.
want to watch at this
It's all
Combine.
about the juniors,
And
man.
there's a few reasons. The elite prospects are the juniors. You look at the mock drafts, which the fans love. Jonathan Martin is a hot name out of Stanford that's with going to the Chiefs. They're at either the 11th or 12th pick. We'll find out at a coin toss on Friday from Indianapolis. But the junior tackles, and because the unrestricted free agent talent pool at tackle is a bit thin this year, I'm really interested to see how these guys go and if one of them can show that, you know, this is a guy you should take at 11 or 12.
Yeah, the kid from Stanford's athletic, though. If you look at him, and you always look at hips, and I mean, you've studied football your whole life, hips and feet. The kid at Iowa comes to mind, too, because Iowa's had now some, you look at guys with, you know, Balaga and what he's been able to do with Green Bay, and so the Hawkeyes have been able to put guys in the NFL that you like at the tackle position, so he's another one that comes to mind. But to me, it's all about the juniors. Who's declaring, who's there, who's the, you know, group. You might get a younger guy there, but a guy that you can kind of morph or build into your system. And who knows at the nose tackle position as well.
Well, when you work out with your V,
V.
and they put you at the 40-yard dash, man, how many of these juniors do you think you could outrun in the 40? Offensive tackles.
Most.
You think you'd finish in the top 30%?
Sure.
You think
I don't know.
you could beat 3 out of 10?
I think I probably could. I just
You think-
the
what
shuttle
is-
runs where I just max out. that and you know,
Hey,
225s.
How much you bench? How much you bench?
I can go 225, 40, 50 times, 60,
Shoot.
whatever it takes.
Wow.
I don't know if you know this, I've done this like 50 times, but hey, got a trainer, I work out.
Yeah.
I work out. Sounds like a song
give,
I know.
Give your trainer some props right now.
Yeah.
I know you work out.
I would tell you I'm
ready for
sexy
the
and I
Combine.
know it, but I think that might be a copyright infringement. Honestly, and it's who's going to the Combine, who's going to be there. That's always kind of a question, too, because we've kind of seen a
The
trend.
full workouts, quarterbacks, who's going to throw?
Who's going to throw? Guys have been throwing. They get advised.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little bit different than it used to be even just like 5 years ago.
Right.
Because now they're going, nah, wait till your pro day. You know, we'll just shove this back a little bit instead of looking at the Combine. Now the Combine has almost become the guys who are overlooked. It's a little bit, to give a comparison, kind of like the East-West Shrine Game. It's like the guys that aren't in the Senior Bowl, but get invited to the Combine, who are kind of thought, and they want to show up, hey, wait a minute, you ought to think of me more. And we've seen some examples of that in the last couple of years. But I wish I could be you. That'd be great to be there. But I'm excited to see what comes out of the combine.
Well, we'll be there, and we'll be giving coverage all throughout the week, not only with our in-house guys, our scouts, and our personnel men, but
who calls
the
the coin flip
prospects as well. It's going to be Scott Pioli will be in there with the new Vice President of Communications, Ted Cruz, will join him. We're going to get some video footage of it, and I don't know who calls the toss.
Ted Cruz, swag.
It's
South
going to be,
Carolina State.
and it's going to be former chief with the GM of the Seahawks, Schneider. He worked here for a while. He'll be, because that's the coin flip.
Schneider is a good dude.
I don't know who.
A little nervous, but he's a good dude.
I don't know who calls in the air. I would suggest tails. It never fails. That's what I would call. So if Scott asked me, Josh, what should I call?
Were you a captain at Washburn? Did you ever call it?
Oh, yeah. Tails never failed, man.
And you won every time?
Every time.
You sound like...
Now, we had rotating captains, so I won like twice. But still, Tails did. It was a 2-0 streak there. But if I'm going to pick one
I'm going to go with the old Washingtonville Wizard here, though. I'm going to go with Pioli to make the call and make the hit.
Well, we don't even know if he's
number 51.
We don't even know if he gets to call it. That's the mystery. So that's something
that's why I'm asking.
To watch for. I don't know who calls it in the air. It's going to be interesting. Maybe they do rock, paper, scissors for who gets to call the coin toss in the air for the 11th or 12th pick. If I'm going to pick one guy, though, to watch with a Chiefs connection, because there's 300 some guys out here, a guy I'm interested to see and to really just to talk to there is Devon Still out of Penn State. And the reason is he has relation with Art Still, you know, a Chiefs Hall of Famer. And there's a cool connection there, and we'll talk to him and be able to get all sorts of great shots of him, shots of Art Still. It'd be a great storyline if he ended up in Kansas City. That's really a guy that I'm just kind of interested in watching there at the Combine.
The vibe I'm getting, though, Josh, and maybe I'm being myopic, but the vibe I'm getting around, whether it's college camps or we've already seen the free agent visits for the Chiefs, is that people understand that this is a team that's moving up. I think people look at the Chiefs and say, wait a minute, the next 3 to 5 years, the window may be opening for these guys, because free agency is much like college recruiting. Guys may visit, do they look at, even if they're visiting, they're interested, saying there's something there, just beyond the money. The money talks, obviously, but I think people see now that there's some arrows pointing upward. And I'm curious what the vibe will be at the Combine, too, because that makes a difference, too, if, you know, guys want to be a part of this as it moves forward.
Well, we've had our time to breathe, not as much as normal with the coaching changes. And, of course, you're on the road all the time, but things are kicking up. This is just the tip of the iceberg. It's Combine week before you know it.
We didn't talk special teams either.
Yeah, free agency signings come up, and then the guys will be back for OTAs and mini camps. We get a full off season this year, and, of course, we'll be with it all year long.
And you're intrigued with free agency, and you should be, but I'm also intrigued this year more than ever with OTAs and mini camps, just because of all the questions in this moving forward, with the guys coming back from the knee injuries and the fact that we have them. We didn't have them a year ago. But I think OTAs with the new coaching staff, basically, and the mini camps will be uber important for this team.
Well, we'll check it out. It starts right here this week on KCChiefs.com with NFL Combine coverage. Interesting stuff, as always, from Mitch Holthus. I think we both agree that offensive tackle, nose tackle are priorities for this team heading into the draft. Of course, that's basically what I've been saying each of the past 2 years. Of course, I also had Justin Houston pegged to the Chiefs accurately last year. Granted, I had him going 21 overall to the Chiefs, but we got him in the third round, so it was it ended up good. But I think with the way the free agent market sets at the tackle position, unless something different happens and a player is released who can come in and be an impact starter right away or offer an improvement that makes sense for the Chiefs, I think now more than ever it makes sense to take an offensive tackle, whether it be the first or second round. If the Chiefs, depending on if they end up in the 11th or 12th position, decide to move back in the draft and take a tackle in the 20s, late in the first round, I think that makes a lot of sense as well. Nose tackle, there are some experienced nose tackles on the free agent market, as we've highlighted some in our 30 free agents in 30 days series. That will continue. So the Chiefs can find a lot more help at nose tackle externally through free agency than I believe they can at the offensive tackle position. So now more than ever, I'm really focusing this week on the offensive tackle prospects at the Combine. Of course, we'll bring you all sorts of different things throughout the week in Indianapolis as we keep it going and up and running on KCChiefs.com. If that little piece of Mitch Holthus wasn't enough to wet your whistle while he's away on basketball duty, one of my favorites, we're going to go to the vault to end this show on how the voice of the Chiefs, Mitch Holthus, became the voice of the Chiefs. Let's check it out.
Very few small towns in America have had a book written about it, but there's a New York Times bestseller written about where I grew up in Smith Center. It's called Our Boys, and it does give everyone a flavor of what it's like to be there. It's not close to anything. It's 90 miles from a McDonald's or a Walmart or a Home Depot, and yet I wouldn't have traded it for anything in the world. There's a lot of pride there, but what I learned growing up there was the value of hard work, because you work. And the second thing you learn is how to treat people.
Mitch was kind of a unique kid. All kids, you know, especially now in Smith Center, they want to be an athlete. I can remember times of Mitch when he was this would probably been in junior high or younger. He always played football at recess. Some of the times when Mitch wasn't playing, he'd be over on the sidelines with a make-believe mic calling the game as a kid, you know. Nobody knew what that would lead to. Maybe Mitch did.
He used to sit upstairs in his room, and he'd sit at the desk, and he'd have all of his papers, just like he does now, and that he outlines everything, and all the little tidbits that he could think of, he'd put on his broadcast posters that he had. And he'd take anything that he could for a mic, and he just loved to sit at that desk. I can remember him sitting up there for hours and hours and just pretending that he was announcing a game.
I grew up loving sports, kind of a gym rat. Went to a small school and played everything, but also realized I could speak. I was into debate and forensics, and so I thought, how can you put those two together? And I started actually in high school and doing some sportscasting at the remedial level. Then I thought I was going to go to law school. I got accepted to 3 law schools. I was a law clerk for 2 years. And thought, nah, I don't want to do that.
We are obviously Kansas State fans, and Mitch would listen to Dev Nelson, and at that time, our radio reception was such that he had to go up to the top of the hill to pick up the reception to hear Dev Nelson do that. And he, at that time, he said, I want to be the voice of the Wildcats sometime. Very few kids really get to live their dream, and that actually happened to him.
So I started now at the very beginning stages, doing high school ball, selling advertising, doing junior college ball. Then had an opportunity to go to Kansas State, where I was the voice of my alma mater for 13 years. And then I got the opportunity, after being turned down by the Vikings, the Falcons, the Bears. I was a finalist. You know, I had 300 applicants for these jobs. I got down to the final 2, final 3. So after kind of being pounding around in this business, I got the best job of all, because I'm the voice of the team that I grew up with.
Jackie Battle is now in the game. Was impressive last week in short yardage. In the win against Jacksonville, they're going to give it off to Battle on a fullback trap, and Battle is close to a first down.
My wife will say, that's Mitch. Sounds like Mitch. That is Mitch, you know. We both know Mitch's voice. When we hear Mitch, we know we're getting an accurate picture of what's going on.
But I want to make that broadcast come alive to the farmer who's working in the field, or the person that's working in the emergency room of the hospital where my mom worked. And then I think about the entire kingdom. I love the kingdom. And the kingdom is basically defined from Des Moines to Tulsa to western Kansas to Columbia, Jeff City area. And I think about all those people. I think about the fabric of those people. What do they want to know about this team? Because they truly, truly love the team. That's why you will always hear me talk about opponent players who either went to college or grew up in the kingdom, because that's part of making the game come alive to them.
Sam Cook, who was born in York, Nebraska. She's blocked the punt. It's in the end zone. Kansas City jumps on it. It's still loose, though. The Ravens trying to dig it out. Now the Chiefs trying to get it. As they unpile, we're waiting for the call. Touchdown! Kansas City! Sean McGraw, the special teams captain and the pride of K-State and Riley County High School, has a block punt for a touchdown.
And he keeps it not so much metropolitan. He has a little local color in it, which really means a lot to the people out here. He'll mention Smith Center once in a while. He'll mention high schools, what's going on in the state of Kansas, what I think really puts him ahead of other people. In fact, he has an interest in what's going on, just on what's going out on the field.
He makes the game interesting. He makes the Chiefs interesting. The Chiefs then become our team.
It just gets us excited out here to know that's kind of a hometown boy and the things he's done for the community and the role model he is for students and athletes here.
Some of the people around here say, well, Mitch is awful lucky to get where he's at today. But I don't think luck had much to do with it. Mitch was a dedicated young man. When he was given a job, he done it. It doesn't matter if it meant going out to farm and work. He was humble enough, he was willing to do it. And so I feel like he's been rewarded for hard work, not by luck.
Gusting wind right to left. Gafford snaps. Placement is down. Suckup's kick is up. And it is good! He got it! Ryan Suckup on the final play of overtime kicks the field goal from 35 yards out. And the Chiefs continue their surprising season, going to 5-2 with the most dramatic of finishes.
The people ask me all the time, what's the call that you remember the most? And I have to be honest, I haven't given it yet. 17 years with this organization, it's been ups and downs. Mostly it's been about the fans, and yet there's been some disappointments. It's why I'm so excited about the current regime and how we're approaching this. I see clips of the 1969 team in the parade, and Lenny up there on the stage with Hank Stram and Lamar Hunt and Bill Grigsby. I pray and hope that in my lifetime I get to experience that day, mainly to see the faces of the fans and the faces of the Hunt family. I want to be there on that day.
Snap to Cyphers, nearly blocked. Cyphers barely gets it away. It's taken by McCluster at the 5. McCluster trying to get to the left side and does. 2 blocks. He's at the 30. McCluster could go. They need to block the punter. 45, 40. They nail the punter. McCluster 30, 20, 15, 10, 5. Touchdown. Kansas City. Dexter McCluster. 94-yard punt return for the Kansas City Chiefs.
I just love to hear him say that, and especially when he kind of slurs it out. And touchdown, Kansas City.